I'd like to welcome everybody to the 2014 December 30th City of Rapid City Legal and Finance Committee. And I'd like the first order of business to be the roll call and determination of a quorum.
Here.
Here. Thank you. Up next is the adoption of the agenda. Did anybody have any additions or deletions from the agenda? Entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we're on the time of general public comment. General public comment is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not currently on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any item not on the agenda, except for placement on the agenda by the unanimous vote of the council members present. I currently have no speaker request forms for general public comment. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak on that? Okay, I'll move on to consent items numbers 1 through 29. I'm going to open public comment for consent items numbers 1 through 29, and I have one speaker request form. I'm not sure who this is for, Dave Goodwin and Suzette Cooney. Which one of you would like to speak? You want to speak together, individually? Okay. You have 3 minutes. If you approach the mic, identify yourselves, folks. When it turns yellow, you have 30 seconds, and red, you please wrap up your comments.
Okay. I'm Suzette Cooney with the Rapid City Downtown Association.
Dave Goodwin, Rapid City Summer Nights. Just go ahead. Good afternoon. I guess we're back today after it's been a little over a month since our last time we talked to you about the Summer Nights permit for 2015. Basically, since that time, the Rapid City Summer Nights and the Downtown Association, we've developed a partnership working forward to make this event a little bit easier for all the businesses involved. I do have 2 slides if we can get. So as you can see here, this is a revised event layout, probably version 15 or 16 as we went through this. But what you can see is this is really similar to the 2013 layout where we're back to St. Joe. One of the biggest changes is the orange you see there is actually 5 o'clock or 5:30. We're looking at closing the street instead of the 3 o'clock as it has been in the past. 7th Street will close at 3. We'll set up the stage that's between the clock shop and U.S. Bank. And then at 5 o'clock we can close 5:30, close St. Joe and expand our event so that there's enough room for all the patrons right in front of the stage. The green arrows you can see there are outside of the colored, the shaded areas. We're not going to move vehicles. We're not going to tow the vehicles. If there's people still there shopping, they can continue on and there's no need to tow the vehicles as in the past. We've had to tow the entire block, or actually 2-block area. So the next slide, the parking impact on this, 30 spots in St. Joe and 40 on 7th. So, Suzette?
Thank you. David and I did spend quite a bit of time talking to the businesses that would be directly impacted by this. Unfortunately, we were unable to reach everybody. I think we have about 10 people left on the list, but the majority of the people we did speak to were in favor. There were 2 exceptions to that. Also, the Rapid City Downtown Association feels that this is a fair compromise, being able to allow for an extra 2.5 hours of retail issue with the parking on St. Joseph Street, and that seems to be the overall consensus of those businesses. We are excited also that the Summer Nights Board will be helping us with a few off-season retail-focused events to help offset some of those hardships that some of the retail businesses have had in the past, giving them an event that's more specifically geared towards retail business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, folks. Okay, we have no further speaker request forms for items 1 through 29. Does anybody wish to speak on any of the items on the consent calendar, items 1 through 29? Okay, I'm going to close public comment on items 1 through 29 and now move on to the council members, see if anybody wants to remove anything from items 1 through 29. Chair recognizes Alderman Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pull item 21, please.
Item number 21. Any further things to be pulled? Entertain a motion to approve the balance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Laurenti, second by Drew to approve items 1 through 29 with the exception of 21. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 21. Item number 21 is approve a special event application for the City of Rapid City Summer Nights Art and Entertainment Festival. The floor is yours, Mr. Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask the City Attorney, if I could, please.
By all means.
Joel, can you give us some direction? I'd like to, well, I won't be able to make the motion now, but a couple of questions about a motion that would include a multi-year approval. Would it be necessary for us to have some sort of right of rescission, if you will, or that type of thing, to ensure that if there are major changes that the city needs to reassess from a safety standpoint, say the police or the fire, that we would be able to do so without there being some contention there? I don't know what the proper motion would be for a multi-year deal, but if you could.
You know, honestly, I'd probably should go back and look at the ordinance a little more as far as what your ability to revoke it if there's an issue. I think if you approve a multi-year deal, you're approving a multi-year deal for this layout. If there were significant changes to the layout, then that would need to be reapproved by the city council. Like, for instance, if they were going to close off additional streets or take more parking, I think they would have to come back and seek approval for that. So I don't know that you're really giving a blank check for the next 3 or how many ever years is being requested. But certainly, you know, the question is, if you have a right to review it every year, is that really any different than just requiring them to reapply every year? So maybe it would be best to address that prior. Give me some time to give that some more thought and address that prior or during the meeting on Monday night.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Valentry. The chair recognizes Darla Drew.
Joel, I'd like to direct a question to the city attorney if possible.
By all means.
Joel, it is a really big deal for people that are planning these events every year to know that they might get a multi-year yes, and that will help them, you know, to get ready to book bands and prepare themselves for the year ahead. So I'd really like to see this motion go forward, you know, to give them a multi-year permit instead of having them come back every year. I've been in that position. It is, you never really know what your position is. You know, so you go into every year kind of blind, hoping that you'll be able to pull this off, and then you have less time to really plan and make things good. And I would also like to ask a question of the Summer Nights Committee, if I could, please.
Whoever wishes to address that for Ms. Drew, Mrs. Drew, excuse me.
Whatever it is.
Ms.
Hi, Sandy. Which way does the band play? To the south?
The band will face to the north. They'll be between U.S. Bank and the clock shop, facing the south. And the reason we won't have to close St. Joe until 5:30 is because you can load the equipment from the sides and the back. So we'll tuck it back in off of St. Joe.
Okay. Just help me out here. So the band plays to the north.
Faces to the north, correct.
Okay.
They'll load from the back on the where U.S. Bank is and the clock shop.
Yeah, okay. So do you see any problems with getting the sound set? Because you'll be trying to set up a band against a flow of traffic.
Well, not really, because the way we have it timed is that we start setting up that band at 3 o'clock. They don't usually sound check till 5 o'clock at the earliest. And so I think that we'll be able to make that work. You know, we start at 6 now instead of at 5:30 as we did in the past.
Yeah.
And the flow we've used that exact same spot in 2013, and it worked fine. The biggest trick is actually maneuvering the stage back into the intersection, but we bought equipment to do that by hand.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
You're welcome.
Chair recognizes Mr. Richie Nordstrom.
My question will be for the chief, if I may.
By all means. Which chief?
Chief Jagras.
Okay.
You've seen the map that we saw just a moment ago, about the green arrows, specifically what I'm interested in on the lines that are going on this particular image that I'm looking at is, can you describe that area and how that's going to be working for the traffic flow?
Okay, St. Joseph Street will not be closed to traffic until approximately 5:30 to allow for the event to begin at 6 o'clock. It's likely that we will detour traffic at Mount Rushmore Road on St. Joe, and then leave one lane of traffic open for local traffic. So the green arrows that you saw up on there, that would be for the local traffic, so businesses are accessible and so that people that are parked in those areas have a route to get out. But as far as the 3 lanes of eastbound traffic on St. Joe, that'll be diverted at Mount Rushmore Road. And we'll work with the Summer Nights staff after we receive council approval for the event permit to come up with some of the finer details on signage and how that's going to be managed.
Thank you. Then the other question I have is, since we've had a precedence from 2013, have you got any experiences from that time frame that have raised concerns or issues that we should be aware of?
Well, I think the event has proven that it's able to be safely handled in that area on St. Joe and 7th Street. The one area of concern is going to be the pedestrian traffic back and forth from the Main Street Square area and the Summer Nights area. So we'll take mitigating steps to ensure public safety, encouraging people to use crosswalks and have additional staff down there and watch the flow of traffic and the speed on Main Street.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And now Mr. Laurenti.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and maintain the floor if I can get a second.
By all means. Motion by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate what I had said before, which is to get a multi-year deal, and obviously there are others that support it that are on this committee as well as the rest of the council, but I just want to make sure that the city attorney can answer that question, as we spoke a little bit on a multi-year deal, so that we can maybe address that on Monday night at the council meeting. So I just want to make sure the attorney's office is prepared for that Monday night. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? I'll just take 2 seconds to say I appreciate the hard work of everybody involved and the ability to work together. I know it's never been my intention or anybody else in this council, at least not that I know of, to micromanage the event. So good luck. Hopefully it works out the best for you. Appreciate your efforts. And the motion is to approve. Any further discussion? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we're on to non-consent items numbers, 30 through 34. I'm going to open public comment on those items, 30 through 34. And item number 30, Mr. Robert Cook, if you'd approach the podium, sir. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Cook. I'm the Senior Managing Director for Teach for America's Native Alliance, and I'm here representing Daphne Richards Cook, who is my wife. You may or may not have heard that Daphne's been having some health issues. She's currently in the regional hospital. She underwent surgery, so she wasn't able to make it here today. I'm speaking in favor of the Alliance of Tribal Tourism Advocates Powell Grounds Interpretation Center. I know that from what I've heard, we're looking, the city council is looking at maybe phasing out this project, but I'm here to really ask you to reconsider and to work with us. This project's been, a dream of the community for many years now. When the proposal was first submitted back in the early 2012 vision, it was funded for that $820,000. Daphne worked with Pat Wiss and Associates to get the plan done. And I know that at that time it was really a dream to really, to build this thing where it would be an opportunity for the visitors who come into the Black Hills to really learn about our culture and history, where artists would be able to sell their products, build a market, the things that they have that really there's no opportunity for our people within the community, other than going to Crazy Horse Memorial and competing against artists from the Southwest. There's no venue for this really unique project here in the community, which is historically, part of the Great Sioux Nation and our Lakota people. And the number of people in this community that could benefit would be tremendous, not with just interpretation, but also just the cultural sensitivity that could come from these groups of people working together. So I'm here to let you know that Daphne and others have really went out there and worked to leverage, an additional $300,000. They got $100,000 from the $150 from the Shakopee Mdewakan community, $100,000 from the Oglala Sioux tribe, and $100,000 on requests from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. So they've leveraged over $1 million, probably $1.2 million for this project. And I know that, there's been several extensions, but I'm asking for compassion from the council to really give them a chance to work, to see this project, see through this time. I'm asking for an extension. Daphne's going to be kind of out of commission for the next 8 weeks or so, but really, seeing if you could extend until June 30th. And then if it's not, then that's your decision to phase out. But give them that opportunity. You've already invested a lot of time into this. We also have to remember that 5 of those years is probably the biggest recession in this country history. There's no philanthropy that came forward from this community, so they've had the outreach outside, and they've exhausted many of the opportunities here. So I'm asking for that 180-day extension to June 30th, if not at least the 90 days until the end of March. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have no further speaker. I do have one speaker request form on item number 31, Mr. Mason, but I do believe you can speak during that time if you wish, or you can do it now. It's up to you. Okay. All right, so I have no further speaker request forms on items number 30 through 34. Does anybody wish to speak on any of those items on the non-consent calendar, items 30 through 34? Not appearing, I'm going to close public comment on those items, and I'm going to move on to item number 30, which is Alliance of Tribal Tourism Advocates, updating the powwow grounds and request for extension of time. Chair recognizes Darla Drew.
Mr. Cook, I have a couple questions for you. If you'd come back to the mic, please. First of all, my sympathy on what the situation is going on in your family. I'm a friend of Daphne, and I hope for her speedy recovery. We all do. Now with this grant, I've watched this for a long time, but I'm not aware. Do you have to have a match for this before you can break ground? Is that one of the items you need to do? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So right now you've raised $300,000?
Yes.
For those of you who might not know, Mr. Cook and I and some people from Main Street Square have been talking about this summer trying something a little different so that you can get those artists out there in front of the community and see what benefit it is to both the artists and the community by making an Indian art market at Main Street Square for this summer. And we didn't have that option 12 years ago when this first was on the table. And I know we've got a little traction on that, so I'm hoping that to get some support from the rest of the council, that we can move forward with something that will satisfy you, maybe even help you raise more money, and get this thing on track. So if you'd like to mention anything about that, or any feelings from your committee or from Daphne, how that is being received.
Yeah, I spoke to Daphne and Mark about it, and different people of the community, and I think it's something that is very favorable. And I think it's not just an artist art market. I think people have a misunderstanding about the powwow grounds and Indian art market. That's just one aspect of providing artisans a chance to market and sell the products or the art that they have. But it's also an opportunity for the storytelling, the interpretation, the sharing of culture, song, dance, interpretation, history. That's really a unique part of this whole interpretation center. So I think that if there's an opportunity to work with the Main Street Square market, that there would be an opportunity to also utilize the stage and be able to provide some type of cross-cultural training or cross-cultural sharing with the community and also with the visitors that come into the community. Because I worked in cultural interpretation. I'm a nationally certified guide and trainer. And I worked at Crazy Horse Memorial. People come to South Dakota for our Lakota culture and history, but yet we're not empowered really as a people to manage our own story. We have others sharing our story or telling our story for us. This is what makes this project unique, is it's an opportunity for our own people to share this story. And that's why this project needs to go forward and continue to be supported. And I know it's been a long road, but we're asking for that, that extra additional time. And then
I think that working with the Lakota people at this particular time in our city's history is very important. And so I would be voting for the extension because I feel that this is an important thing. I think if given time through the summer, we'll know a lot more coming into the fall about how this might work and how it might be successful for the entire community. And I do support what you're trying to do as far as like building those bridges. And we talked a little bit on the phone, and I said I wouldn't speak for the Indian people because I'm not American Indian, and you said, we don't need someone to speak for us, we need someone to stand with us.
Yes.
And I loved those words, so thank you for your time, Mr. Cook.
Just one quick comment. This isn't just Daphne's project. I know a lot of people think, because she has been, a major driving force between it. But this is the community's dream and vision to be able to do this, and we have a lot of support for it. And this is a project that could be self-sufficient. It's not a project where they're going to come back over and over and ask for money. Once it gets going, it's going to generate the revenue and become self-sufficient. So that's the thing, providing jobs and opportunity for our Native people in a community that has the highest poverty rate in the country for Native people. That's Rapid City, and we want to do something to change that.
So do we. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Richie Nordstrom. I still don't have a motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may offer a motion to extend this until March. I believe that's what Mr. Cook suggested we could do.
The motion is by Nordstrom, second by Laurenti. Mr. Nordstrom, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Cook, if I can ask you a couple more questions.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any experience visiting with the Journey Museum folks where this project is being planned for?
I don't think since the turnover of the new director, I don't think Daphne or Mark have been able to go and talk with the new director. I know they work closely with the previous board and the directors, but it's something that I definitely will definitely meet with them and work with them.
Thank you, and I know that they would appreciate that conversation, and even if it is informal, having that conversation, they get them, especially the new staff over there, to get them up to speed with what you're planning.
I'll commit to do that.
Please do. And the next question I have is that you had stated that you have raised, was it $300,000?
Yes, sir.
That money is in the bank?
It's not in the bank.
Okay.
No. It's committed. It's committed through committee and then goes before the councils for approval.
The reason I'm supporting thank you, Mr. Cook.
Yes.
The reason I'm supporting this, and I've gotten some emails from the Journey Museum folks as well, and what they are supportive of the extension as well, and but at the same time they would still like to meet with the ATA group and get them, especially the new staff that we have at the Journey Museum, to bring them up to speed on what is transpiring. The concern that I have is that the money is being pledged, but it is not in the bank yet. And the reason why I'm supporting the 90-day extension is that it would be give you an opportunity to actually get that money in the bank, put it there, and then demonstrate at the same time. I know there's some other ideas that are in the works right now that can support this and help you out. And I also know that there are some folks on the Journey board that would be interested in supporting this and helping you out in this project. But again, it's just the communication part that seems to be lacking.
Yeah.
They would like to be brought up to speed on that. The other area that I'm interested in for this extension, it'll give you, the ATA group, the opportunity to do that, raising that funds, plus kind of a larger image picture for me is that it will help out on the issues that we're dealing with as far as the community is with the Native Americans and what is happening to that community right now. I know I've got a number of issues that I'm concerned about in that area. The last area reason I'm supporting this extension is that it has to do with, it gives you the opportunity to work on these other projects that are in the works. And I don't know if we can go public with those just yet on those concepts, because I understand there's still some negotiations going on with that. And then if those negotiations fail, then I need to do something next with this extension as well. And the Journey folks need to be aware of what that is going to be taking place at that time as well. So that communication, I believe, is very critical. And essentially, if we don't have that avenue of communications and you have that opportunity to work on those other negotiations that are taking place, I will have to cut you off as well from the vision funds. Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Chair will recognize Alderman Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. And I as well, obviously, support the extension. However, I have some concerns, and I have a few questions that I'm going to ask, but my concerns mainly surround some of the deferring of the Phase 1 into Phase 2, and I don't know if the police and fire have had a chance to look at some of these things, such as the deferment of the perimeter fence to Phase 2 of this. So I'd like to make sure that they weigh in on this as well. I know we're not approving or denying this part of it, but this is part of what's been attached to this agenda item. So I have some concerns about that, how that's going to affect whether it's in use during those times. I'd assume that it is, since it has, in lieu of perimeter fencing, wristbands would be used. However, that would increase traffic on, that would open up the entire area, and we'd have multiple points of entry without some sort of control. So that would change some of the safety factors involved if it's going to be used during the time that there isn't any perimeter fencing. So I have some concerns about that. And then if I could, I'd like to ask Finance a question on this particular.
By all means. Are you Finance today?
Can you fill in when or what amount we have in vision funds committed to this project? And when Phase 1 was, I don't know if you have the original Phase 1 start date and when it's been extended to, but if you could speak to that as well, that'd be great.
From what I can tell, it appears that it was originally in 2005. We had $812,000. And it looks like our balance $667,957, I believe, is Phase 2, which was in 2014.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to support the extension. However, I have all these lingering questions. This is not part of what we're approving. We're just approving to extend. But I just want to make sure these answers, we get answers to these really important questions on this. And I would love to see this happen. I think it would be great if it can be completed. I'm concerned that we might not ever get to see it, but maybe part of what Alderwoman Drew is speaking about might spark some things that will help this particular project come to fruition. So I will approve the extension and hope that in the interim, by March, we have something more solidified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion. Any further discussion? Motion is to extend till March 2015. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 31. Jordan Mason, discussion of possible policy change pertaining to, I'm sorry, I've doodled all over this part of the agenda. The effective date of ordinances and resolutions. Sir, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Name's Jordan Mason, address is 4021 Lakeview Drive, number 3. I come before you today to discuss a topic more dealing with process. Just as a good quote, it isn't what you do, but how you do it. Today I come before you to discuss the how. I want to be clear that I am not here to discuss the Civic Center, nor its expansion. I am here to discuss how the Common Council adopts ordinances and chooses to act upon them. The difference between a free society and one that is not is commonly only seen by a process which affords citizens a right to have their grievances heard and for a fair and equitable determination. As an example, private property is only taken by a government in a free society through a process to determine the government's need and with just compensation, whereas elsewhere it is just taken. Those that are accused are given a fair defense in a free society, whereas elsewhere they are just prosecuted. While the point may seem minute, it remains one of the fine lines that protects citizens in a free and open society. The specific point that I am coming to you today, before you today to discuss is regarding the legal adoption of ordinances. I've included and provided you a copy of South Dakota Codified Law 919.7 and 1913, tongue twister, the South Dakota Municipal League's Council Meetings 101 Basics on Procedure, two different cities, which just goes over their municipal codes to show how they've formally adopted that, and also an example of an exception to some of this process, and then also a proposed ordinance. The simple explanation, I thought, was very eloquently stated in the South Dakota Municipal League's Council Meetings 101 Basics on Procedures, where it says, unless an ordinance or resolution is drawn to take effect immediately upon passage, all ordinances and resolutions become effective on the 20th day after passage and publication. I did provide an example of that exception in the City of Watertown example, and I have also provided examples from other cities that have formally adopted this, and then finally I included in a proposed ordinance change to allow the City of Rapid City to formally adopt the state procedure and how we adopt ordinances and resolutions. And I come before you just to hopefully to open up a discussion on process and government process today. Thank you, and I'll stay for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. And Chair recognizes Dr. Alderman Richie Nordstrom. Excuse me. Excuse me.
I don't know if I got demoted or, but anyway, thank you for the title, new title. I'll make a motion to acknowledge the report first.
To acknowledge.
And then if I can make a couple of comments, and this is very brief. If I can ask Jordan a question as well.
Mr. Mason.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Richie.
You bet. Just a little bit of explanation on the process that you're referring to, just to make sure I'm clear on the understanding of it, is that your concern was the adoption of an ordinance that we passed recently for the city council, right. And then we the city council made a motion to adopt another resolution that was more in effect tied to that first ordinance that was. Now your concern is. Just elaborate a little bit more for me.
To put it simply, my concern is putting the cart before the horse. In the specific example that obviously the council knows what we're talking about, in the ordinance that was passed, it was passed by the city council collectively. However, it had not been published and was not legally effective. In essence, it wasn't a law. And the issue that I have concern about is when you're taking action on things that don't exist legally. And essentially, back to my point of process, the process is there to allow, as we recently saw with the resolution, we allowed for 20 days for people like myself and the mayor and others to get out there to have a formal public discussion. But there was no formal public discussion on the ordinance, which, again, state law allows, and the process allows for people to come back and say, I'd like the 20 days to talk about the funding or whatever the ordinance pertains to. So that's my concern, is that we're putting the cart before the horse, essentially. We're acting on things that don't exist.
Thank you, Jordan. And I don't agree with that, what you're making that assessment on. Primarily, number one is that the public was informed of it. We had 2 readings, and that happened over basically a 1-month time period. So the public did have the opportunity for the input into that. Number 2 is that if that ordinance was challenged, then the second ordinance that was tied to this, then that would have been delayed as well. And brings me back to my major concern that I have on this is efficiency. Government is not very efficient to begin with, and this will ultimately, in my mind, slow down the government process. Whereas if there was no public concerns raised during the readings that we had on this, and then there was no petitions brought forward or even sought after, that would have been given the public an opportunity to vote on that ordinance number 1 that you're referring to. So that's where my disagreements are at. And again, it's just, in my mind, government is not very efficient to begin with, and this only makes it less efficient. Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Chair recognizes. Joel, do you want to talk? No. Okay. Chair recognizes. Oh,
Mayor.
I guess everybody's okay. The mayor speaks.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I had the privilege of being elected to the City Council in 2002. When I look at my memory on the number of referendums that we've had since that time, I can count 6. Parkview Drive Extension, 2002. The Adult-Oriented Business Ordinance, 2003. Walmart Highway 16 site, 2006. Cabela's, 2007. Main Street Square, 2010. And the Civic Center yesterday. So that's 6 items. You look at, on average, we have, and this is a conservative estimate, 100 items per agenda. Sometimes we have way more than that. 100 items per agenda times 24 agendas a year. So that's 28,800 items in 12 years. That is 2 100,000ths of 1%. You take the number 6 and you divide it into 28,800, and it's, again, 0.00002%. 2 100,000ths of 1%. We have always operated under the assumption, and this is legal. It's not a theory of legality. It is legal. There's legal precedent to back this up. That every agenda we pass items that are dependent on other items that are not yet effective, but would be effective by the time the dependent item is effective. Two recent examples that I can think of just in the last several weeks are a tax increment financing district and a project plan. You can't have a project plan without a tax increment financing district, but you don't put 30 days between the district and the project plan. You pass them both in the same meeting, and they could theoretically both be referred. My recollection is that Jordan was at the council meeting or was aware of the vote on the Civic Center on the ordinance, and there was an opportunity to refer that item. And strategically, I know he's opposed to the Civic Center. What he should have done was refer that item, and he could have referred that item. He could have referred both items, and so it is an absolute. It is wrong. It is absolutely wrong to say that the rights of our citizens were violated. Can you imagine the extraordinary uproar that would happen if every Tuesday morning Brett Limbaugh in planning or Terry Waltersdorf would say, well, we can't give you that permit right now because we need to wait 10 days for the item to be published and then wait another 20 days beyond the date of publication in case someone refers that item. Can you imagine how ridiculous that would be? But in order to carry this to its logical conclusion, it instantly becomes illogical because then you have to do it that way for every item. South Dakota, in my understanding, it was the first in the nation, or one of the first in the nation, to have a referendum law. I support that law wholeheartedly. It is used very rarely and very sparingly, and to add that much time in between every item that's dependent on another item will make city government run slower. With your help, we have streamlined processes in many ways. It used to be we had 86 committees, now we have about 41. It used to take about 70 days to pay a bill at the Civic Center, now it takes less than 30. Steve Laurenti, I know you have Six Sigma experience. Perhaps some of the rest of you have Six Sigma experience. The mere idea of this should be offend our sensibilities, and I would ask the council not only to acknowledge this, but to consider passing a motion affirming our current process. And I want to thank everyone for the discussion.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mason, did you have something else you wanted to?
If I could, Chair, I would like to just offer a simple rebuttal to some of the comments.
Fine with me.
Appreciate it.
Why not?
Well, while I appreciate the comment on efficiency, I think it's fair to say that our government was never meant to be efficient or quick. The fact of the matter is, our government was established to be fair and equitable. Again, as an example, those that are accused are not just simply prosecuted, or like in the country of Iraq, before we established a new government for them, where they were simply just taken out and prosecuted by the government. We allow for a fair trial by jury, which is a long and sometimes extenuating process, and might I add, often costly to have our court system. But we do have a process. Equally so, I believe that in this state, which Mayor Quaker eloquently pointed out, we were one of the first to initiate the referendum process to allow the people, or the rights of the governed, to govern themselves through that action. Again, I'm not trying to ruffle feathers, but I am saying that the state law is clear. The South Dakota Municipal League, in their basics on council meetings, is clear. And all I'm saying is that unless an ordinance is law, I do question how you're acting on something that does not exist. The facts is that the council did take action on something that was not legally effective. That is an indisputable fact and was agreed upon not only by myself, but in the writings of your city attorney and through other documentation. All I'm asking the council to consider today, and I agree with the mayor's last statement, I'm not asking you to actually change process. I'm asking you to recognize it and to formally adopt it and to follow it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Mr. Weifenbach's been waiting patiently over here. I consider this round's over now. Mr. Weifenbach, your floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Mr. Mason's restraint when he brought his information forward in reference to this. I think that I'm not exactly sure what the word is, but they're understanding that there is a process that's important. I think the people come here with an expectation. They expected, our rules say 20 days. And in this case, the council voted on something that was dependent upon another item that wasn't quite a law yet. Mr. Mason wanted to refer the item and started the process to refer the item, or I'm not exactly sure how that whole process worked. But what happened was his action would have nullified the actions of the referral that we are now experiencing now. And I think that has to be understood, that there's things that stop people from doing particular things. We may have a rule that you can do this, but we're making the rule, well, you can do that, but you really can't do that because, and I'm hoping people will understand what I'm saying, though, if his writ would have went through, the referendum, all the signatures that have been taking place would have been null and void. And I think that's the biggest issue here, and I think having this conversation is important because I don't think, at least I wasn't aware of the fact of what happened that night when it happened. And I do recall that Mr. Mason had left that night before that vote took place, if I recall. But the fact of the matter is, my understanding after the fact and after everything came to light was that the council up here, for some reason, wanted to rush the referendum to in belief that it would be referred to have a March vote instead of a June vote, because a June vote would have convoluted with the elections that were taking place for council and mayor. And we talk about inefficiencies of government, and I'm not sure that, I think everybody understands that. I don't think it needs to be pointed out. I think, but in the same case, we are need to be fair. We have a process that people have expectations. And if you want to be efficient, it would have been just as efficient to have the election in June. We wouldn't have had a special election to cost us another $60,000 or $80,000 for the referendum item that's taken place. So I think when we consider all this, and I don't know that we need an ordinance or a rule, but I think this process is part of the process that brings to light when we make these decisions. We need to understand what we just did, the decision that we made, how it affects a domino effect down the road. So I appreciate the discussion that's taken place. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weifenbach. And if I may, I think that part of the reason for not having it in a June election was due to the contracts with the current Civic Center expansion. The price would have gone up. So anyway, Mr. Nordstrom.
But I have gotten several emails, and that was never brought up. Okay. I mean, it was never brought up before time. It was never brought up after the term. I can share my emails with everybody. The only thing that I figured was that for whatever reason they didn't want them together. So I don't know if there's any validity to that.
Sure. Mr. Nordstrom.
A couple of different topics just arose here out of this last points and counterpoints. The comments that the chair just addressed here were addressed in different public forums, if I recall correctly. And so that information was out there to the public, and I forget the exact specifics on, or the specificity of those items that were brought up, but I do recall that what the chair just recognized and informed us about had been out there in the public in the past. If I can ask the city attorney a question about the compromise that was reached.
By all means.
And if I understand correctly on the compromise that you were able to reach with Mr. Mason, it addressed some of his concerns, addressed some of our concerns, but do you care to elaborate any further on those compromise points?
No.
You know, I don't know if I'd really, if it addressed people's concerns. I mean, I've taken the position from the night the action was taken that there was nothing that was inappropriate that was done. I issued a press release when we settled it that had some language, which I've never denied that ordinance amending the Vision Fund was not legally effective when the resolution, I mean, that's just a fact. It wasn't legally effective until December 19th, and the action on the resolution occurred before that. Where the disconnect seems to be in the confusion is whether or not it was required for that ordinance to be legally effective before you took the action on the resolution. That's where the disagreement is. It's not whether or not the ordinance was effective. That clearly had not occurred yet. So I issued a statement acknowledging the ordinance wasn't effective, which I acknowledged the night of the meeting, if you recall. And then we agreed to put this item on the agenda for Mr. Mason, which, again, as a citizen, he has a right, whether or not he had withdrawn his writ, he would have had a right to have this item put on the agenda and addressed. So we agreed to do that. Other than that, there wasn't really any accord reached. As far as some of the allegations, the time, again, to discuss an ordinance is before it's adopted by the council. The publication and 20-day period is not meant to provide an opportunity for the public to discuss an ordinance. It's meant to provide an opportunity for people to collect signatures and perhaps refer that ordinance. There was nothing that you did that prohibited somebody from referring that ordinance or collecting signatures. So, you know, there was nothing about it. It went through 2 readings, met all the legal requirements. So there was nothing about it that in any way decreased the ability of the public to debate or consider that ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, another topic that was had been approached by Mr. Mason was the use of laws that had to do with the justice system. And if I'm understanding correctly, all of those laws are that was recited here, just as for examples, are written by the state legislature. However, that is comparing apples to oranges with what we do here on the city council, is raising issues that are called ordinances. And those ordinances have been overlapped. They've done overlapping in the past before. So using apples and oranges as a comparison of what we just did, ultimately it confuses the public, and that's my major concern, is that this inefficiency that is being introduced here will ultimately confuse the public and remove some more talking points that should be addressed to the initial point that needs to be really, really addressed. And with those distractions, and in my opinion, that's all they are, is just distractions. And it takes away from the project that needs to be done and the public needs to be aware of. I believe that's all I have at this point. Thank you. I'll yield.
Do I currently have a motion?
Yes, to acknowledge.
Motion to acknowledge, just making sure. Okay, motion is to acknowledge. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Item number 33, second reading of ordinance, recommendation of ordinance 6025, repealing chapter 10.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to wards and precincts and adopting a new revised chapter 1.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Motion to move, approved by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Item number 34, request for property tax abatement as follows. Peter Jorgensen, 2013, amount to be determined.
Move to approve.
Motion is to approve by Darla Drew, second by Laurenti, and I assume that's the amount that's stipulated in the agenda? Is that correct? Okay. Finance officer?
There is an amount of $1,913.36.
I just want to make sure it's in the record. I don't know if we need to read it into the record.
It's an attachment.
Okay.
Shannon Rittberger.
Sure. I just didn't know if it procedurally, if I need to put the amount in the record officially, if it just attachment was sufficient. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Motion is to approve. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn? We are now adjourned.